Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangama tassa tawaraye survantha munchantu satang. I can speak in English. Coming back, having to speak Thai all the time. Your brain gets a bit weary. So there's noticing the way it is, and this reflective style of the Buddha. This sometimes, like in the West, in Europe, for example, they're so rationally oriented that they want to use language all the time to describe and define everything, and this is one of the obstructions that Praptarang have, really, is that we're so dependent on definition and defining, naming, and yet most experience is nameless, when you really are aware. It is so, what we experience in the present doesn't have a name, or you try to define it or describe it, you can't really come to terms with it. You can describe maybe a certain thing in the room, or give some kind of poetic interpretation, but the aim of the Buddhist teaching is to develop this awareness, intuitive awareness, where you actually begin to develop your wisdom faculties to discern, to be able to see and know in a direct way without having to name anything or define anything. And I notice, like, Western people tend to think reality is in nothing's real unless it has a name or a definition, a limit of some sort, and then we have abstract words. And like this, for example, a teaching that I've been using for several years in England is there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. Therefore, there is the escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. Now, this is one of the teachings from the Udana or Samyutta Nikaya, but it's teaching that I've followed for years because it's a kind of perfect, it's an exemplary presentation of the paradigm the Buddha uses in his teaching, in his expression. And so, just to begin to, like the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned, this is the world, the realm of the senses, the body, the thoughts, memories, feelings, is all what is born, formed, created, and conditioned. So, and this teaching, all sankharas are impermanent, nisha dukkha anatta. That applies to all conditioned phenomena, but unconditioned, unborn, uncreated, unformed, try to imagine that. It's a negation of the born, the created, the formed, the unborn, uncreated. But just observing that in your own mind, how language works. You can't define it has no boundary or definition. You can't, so the unborn, you can't define it. You can't imagine it. You can't create an image of it. So we tend to think that it's a more like an abstraction, see it as a kind of metaphysical abstraction rather than the reality of now. So through the intuitive awareness, through awareness, sati sampajanya, then we can begin to embrace the present moment in a way that includes rather than defines or excludes or describes anything. And this is where the wisdom faculty develops, the panya, being able to discern the born and the unborn. So like in just awareness, then we know, first we start with the unborn, because that's with the born, because that's what we're identified with, what we believe in, what we're conditioned to think is reality. The sense of a self, I'm this person, this body, and nationality and gender and all the rest. So we become, this is our real world, is this world of the born and the created. And of course, all of that is, the Buddha keeps reiterating, anicca, dukkha, anatta. So then, like in a lot of teachings of Vipassana in the West, they emphasize this seeing the impermanence of conditioned phenomena, but the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned generally ignored, at least from my experience in living in the UK. So, and yet this is the reality of now. It's unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. So you try to figure that out. You can't. Your thinking mind can't deal with it, because the thinking mind is so limited to conditioned phenomena, to the born, the created. So that's where this mindfulness is the way, is the escape from the born, the created, the form, the conditioned. If we just try to rearrange the conditions and the forms and manipulate them, then we're caught in the whirlpool of change, which only leads to more suffering, disappointment, disillusionment. So the aim, like our life here, Nanacha, being a bhikkhu, samanera, pokha, or whatever, is to really begin to trust in the awareness of the moment, to begin to recognize the unborn, uncreated as the reality of now. It's Dhamma. It's not personal. It's not made up of things. It's the things in this moment change according to other conditions. But say, for example, we're separate beings in form. So I'm sitting here, Ajahn Kevali's there, so forth. And this is the form and the condition, the names, the conventional realities that we use. But then the Paramatta Satya, or ultimate reality, includes all that. It doesn't define, but it's the ability to discern. We have to live in the world of the born and the created. There's a planet that we live on, the universe, the sun and moon, and the solar system, and all that is the created, the born. But this special ability that the Buddha pointed to of the deathless reality, the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And then when I chanted Namo Tassa, then I chanted this Pali phrase, Aparita de Sangama Tassa Tawara, which means something I always liked. One of the gate to the deathless is open. Trust in this and give yourself to this reality, to the reality of here and now. So it's like an announcement to the world that there is an escape from birth and death, from a conditioned world, from your own conditioned habits, your own fears, desires, emotional problems, memories, and prejudices, biases, attitudes, and whatnot. So it's this Ajahn Chah I found, he was a teacher of excellent wisdom, because he's always pointing at this, and it's something you point at. Like your life here as a monk is is to, not to become a monk and identify with seniority or position or, cling to the idea of I'm a bhikkhu, but it's more just a convenient, expedient means for awareness, for confining our life more, making it more simple and less problematic, because lay life now is very complex and complicated. And people are just very confused everywhere, because of there's so many options and problems and difficulties in every possible way, So here at Naracha, you see, this is a rare opportunity to really direct your attention in a way that, this is the aim of this, to support this mindfulness rather than to recondition you, to kind of condition you into some kind of Buddhist samana as an identity. Over the many years that I've been a bhikkhu, I found it, that's why I have great respect for this tradition, because I found it such a kind of accurate, useful convention to investigate reality, and not just to changing into a Buddhist monk and adopting a monastic form, but to really see the attachments we have, the desires, the tendencies, the habits that one personally has or experiences in this form of the body, and the sense of identifying with the body and the personality as being me and mine. So in the Four Noble Truths teaching, actually the first two Noble Truths give you the clues, the suffering and then the causes of suffering. And then as you investigate the causes of suffering and you begin to notice it, not to judge it, not to take sides, but to observe, all that arises ceases, both, as objects of your senses and feelings and memories and conditions, emotions that you have in your own mind. You begin to recognize, like the Puto mantra, this awareness, this Puru style of the forest tradition is, I found very beneficial, because there is a knowing, one is incarcerated in a form for a lifetime, so you have to deal with the problems of this form, the body, and then the karma, the conditioning process that one received after birth, through the cultural, social identities, that education and so forth that we acquire. And then the aim of the Buddhist teaching is to return to this awareness, pure conscious awareness, before you impose anything into it. And it's empty. It isn't annihilating anything, but there's no sense of grasping, or in that emptiness you begin to discern the difference. You discern grasping desires are like this, non-grasping is like this. So then you can see for yourself that non-grasping there's no suffering. When I start grasping things out of desire and ignorance, then I get caught, in the tendencies I have as a conditioned personality to make problems out of little things, or to be caught in fear and self-consciousness and guilt and remorse and all those emotions that that are generated out of this conditioning, with this blind conditioning that you receive after you're born. Like when a baby's born, it has a human form and it's conscious, but it isn't a person yet. It doesn't have a language. And it doesn't have an identity, either with its body as being male or female, or being Thai or English or whatever. It's just pure conscious awareness it has instinctual intelligence, like to survive, and it's that kind of survival mechanism operates right from the first moment. But then, as as we grow older, we're influenced by what our mother thinks and says, and father, and the social group we are in, and nationality, and then we develop a sense of separate identity and self. And so that's the biggest, the greatest obstruction. It's Sanyojana, the first one, Sakaya Ditti, because it's so kind of insidious. It just kind of holds you into believing everything you're thinking or feeling. And so this mindfulness then allows us to observe the feeling, the emotions, the conditioning that we experience that arises when certain other conditions create that opportunity. So, and as you through the years of practice, then you keep cultivating this awareness in your life, so it integrates well into life. As I've had to, I've been caught into positions of establishing monasteries now for most of my monastic life, and being a head monk and so forth, and taking on all these duties, could be an obstruction, because if one identifies with position, then then you really can't survive as a personality. But you can, through this awareness, and this is what Lupa Cha emphasized, that this has to be the priority, this awareness, and begin to recognize and trust it. Like the third noble truth is actually the insight into the cessation of conditioned phenomena. And when conditioned phenomena ceases, in consciousness, then there's the unborn. What's left is unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, and you can discern that. You can know that it's not an abstract philosophical ideal. It's reality. It's real. It's the ultimate reality, and this is the gift of our human birth, is that we have this occasion to know this. We're not just helpless victims of our karma, like the animal world tends to be caught in its karmic forms, so it can't reflect on its own existence, or it can't discern the unborn, uncreated, but so it operates according to its species, its instinctual tendencies, and the forms of the various creatures that exist. And then we have an animal form, so we're not that much different physically from a chimpanzee. But I don't know if chimpanzees can reflect, but human beings can, and this, of course, is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. Its emphasis on mindfulness is because this is the escape hatch from ignorance and suffering. So it's this is a teaching that is an ancient teaching. It's not like modern New Age philosophy or psychology. So it comes from ancient time in India. So it's not something new, and that's what somebody like myself, American, brought up in the kind of attitudes of history. I majored in history at university, and thinking of ancient times and modern times, and also in the West sometimes they say, well, Buddhism is ancient teaching appropriate for people in India 2,500 years ago. But what has it to offer, modern people in a modern society? But it is impressive to see how eager people are in countries like the United Kingdom or European countries or the States, Australia, how eager they are to hear this kind of teaching and to be able to have some kind of opportunity to practice it. The monastic form is probably because it is a traditional form, so it keeps the teaching from disappearing, because this kind of teaching, it would disappear immediately after the enlightened being died. If the Buddha hadn't established a Vinaya, we wouldn't know anything about the Buddha. Probably he would have been a memory or worshipped him as some kind of deity of some sort. But because he did establish the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and then this is his first sermon after enlightenment. It's a teaching that I think, I see it as really perfect in itself. It has everything in it you need to know for liberation. But it's a matter of applying it. It's not just understanding it or questioning or arguing about the meaning of this word or that word or various interpretations, but it's actually, suffering isn't some abstract, rare experience. It's the ordinary, banal experience of most of us, all of us, really, in daily life. And so we experience dukkha in Wat Nanachat and anywhere else, in Bangkok or in this paradisical resort in Phuket the past week. And it was as close to heaven as I've ever been, but I could still see it. It wasn't an escape from suffering. And then the escape from suffering is always in the citta, in the mind. So I tell the story when I was, before I went to England. It was 1977, I think. I went to live in the UK in 1977. So it was, before I went there, I went to see Luang Pu Khao in Udon, because I always had a great admiration for him. He was one of the disciples of Luang Pu Man. And he was very old at the time, so I went to his monastery in Udon, and I just wanted to pay respect to him. I didn't want to, bother him, or because he's very old and he wasn't out in public place. He was in his room. So the monk that was serving him told me to go in the room, and I thought, no, I don't want to. This is very English, even before. Don't want to be a nuisance, don't want to bother him, and the monk insisted I go in the room. And so I opened the door, and it was quite dark in the room, and there was this body lying there, looked like a corpse, and I crawled in on my hands and knees, and then Luang Pu turned and looked at me, and these very bright eyes, glowing eyes. His body looked like a shriveled corpse, but his eyes were radiant. And so I told him that I'd be leaving Thailand and going to live in England. So he, was very pleased to hear that and gave me his blessing. But the reason why I always admired him, because after the first or second Vasa at Wat Pah Pong, Luang Por Chah, I think it was the first Vasa, Luang Por Chah took Thanajan Mahamon and I on a trip, and we went to visit these Ajahns, like Luang Pu Fan in Sokol Nakhon, and Luang Bua and Ajahn and so forth, and we and at that time I couldn't understand Thai very well, so but Ajahn Chah had been given this Philips tape recorder, with a reel. They didn't have cassettes then, so and Ajahn Chah did like gimmicks, so he was taping he'd get these monks to say things, give Dhamma reflections, and then he'd tape them, and so I couldn't understand what they were saying, but so I sat there in silence, and then it was time to go, and Tanajan, Tenjoku Namon, and Luang Por Chah left before me, and then Luang Pu, he was sitting in a wheelchair, and he beckoned to me to come, and so he gave me this sermon. It was very, sermon that I've never forgotten. Even it's very simple, and even I can understand it with the limited time that I had at that time, and that was it's here. Reality is here. Do jit, do jai, and so that, because it's coming from obviously a very wise master, even though that can sound rather meaningless, or you hear it all the time, just watch your mind kind of reflections, but because of the significant circumstances that I was experiencing, it really meant a lot. And of course that's what the teaching really is. It's to really see that it's a matter of this awareness of observing, rather than becoming anything or trying to get rid of things and struggle with negativity or lust or things like this, and to try to get rid of them and try to become something that, like the way we interpret scriptures oftentimes is from a very attaining mind, like attaining stream entry, or attaining arahantship, or attaining something we don't have. And so this approach of attainment I found very deluding, because I'm from a very attaining culture, goal-oriented, competitive society, and so I, here in Nana Chak, when we first established this place, I changed from fight with your kilesas, kill your kilesas, to observe them. Because this is Puru, this Puto mantra reminds you of just being the observer, not the critic, not the judge, but the observer. And then the form that you're in as a bhikkhu is, it's a expedient vehicle for living as a human being at this time. So it simplifies, it makes our choices less, we have to give up all kinds of things. We have to go against our own habit tendencies, and it gives us boundaries to run into, to resist or fight. But as we begin to, the aim of the Vinaya is not just to kind of conform to it in a resigned, passive way, but to actually use it for mindfulness. So you're actually observing your own stubbornness, rebelliousness, resentments as you're living here in Nanacha, the way that one's emotional reactions are ignited through restraint and restriction and through limitation on action and speech. So I want to offer this as a reflection and encourage you in every way to really appreciate opportunity that you have here to really cultivate this path in a very practical, realistic way.